Okay, today in IM2 we're going to learn how to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. So the first thing we need to look at is, what do these quadratic equations have in common? Stop and think about it for a minute. Okay, they are all perfect square trinomials. And we're going to be using perfect square trinomials a lot with completing the square. So you want to be able to recognize them. Okay? Okay, so what is a perfect square trinomial? We have one right here. And what are its properties? We know that the first term and the last term are perfect squares. And we can factor it just like this. How do we test a perfect square trinomial? We take the square root of the first term, so we get x, and we take the square root of the c term, which is 4, and we multiply that by 2, and if that equals that middle term, then it is a perfect square trinomial. Okay? And then we take the plus from there, and that gives us our factor. Okay, the first step in learning how to solve completing the square is just to complete the square. And so that's what we're going to talk about here. So you take this expression here that's not complete, and we need to come up with the final piece that makes it a perfect square. So you add the square of half of the coefficients. You're going to take b over 2 squared, and you're going to put it here. Now the first side is a perfect square trinomial. So let's do a couple of those and get some practice. So for this one, I'm going to show it all to you. The first thing you're going to do is identify what your b is. Then you're going to take b divided by 2 and square it, and that gives you 1. Now you have a complete expression, and you can factor it as a perfect square trinomial. Okay, let's do a couple from your journal. So the first thing I'm going to do is identify my b. It's 14. I'm going to divide by 2. Then I'm going to square it. So that would be 7 squared would be 49. Okay, then I can factor it. Remember, the sign is borrowed from there, so it's x minus 7 squared. Okay, down here, identify your b. It's 11 divided by 2. We're going to square that. We're going to add 121 over 4. When we factor it, it's x plus 11 over 2 squared. Okay, notice that this number matches the factor. Okay, that is in your parentheses. And there's your answers. Okay, so how is this equation different from the previous examples? This one has a solution. And we're not going to do this exact problem yet, but I just wanted to show you that a typical problem will have an answer. We'll get back to this problem in a minute. So to solve a quadratic equation in this form, first you complete the square of this half, and then you solve using square roots. What else must be done when you add the term to complete the square? I'm going to have to add that term to both sides. So when I add it here, I also have to add it here to keep my equation in balance. So if you want to know exactly what the steps are to complete the square, here they are. You can write this down in your notes, read them and go through them, and we'll get to these. We're now going to get to these steps and learn about those. Okay, so we're going to go back to our equation that we just looked at, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a little room for us to complete our square. Now what I like to do, and remember it's always positive, I like to write the plus over here as well. Okay, because then I don't forget to do it. So I go 8 over 2 squared is 4 squared is 16. And now I get a 16 over here. So I get x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 1. Now I'm going to factor this. X minus 4 squared equals 1. The next step is very tricky. We're going to take the square root of both sides. The square here cancels that, and we get x minus 4, don't even need the parentheses anymore, equals plus or minus 1. Now we're going to add the 4 over to the other side, and we get x equals 4 plus or minus 1. So x equals 4 plus 1, which is 5, and 4 minus 1, which is 3. And now I have my zeros. Okay, let's do a couple in the book. So first thing I'm going to do, and you can stop and try these on your own. Okay, so we're going to go plus blank equals 3 plus blank. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So I factor x plus 1 squared, I forgot that part, equals 4. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and I get x plus 1 equals plus or minus 2. Subtract 1 from each side, I get x equals negative 1 plus or minus 2. So my x's are negative 1 plus 2, which is 1, and negative 1 minus 2, which is negative 3. Okay, over here, the first thing you have to do is move that 10 over to the other side. So I get x squared plus 14x, I'm going to put my blank in there, equals 10 plus blank. Okay, so I'm going to go 14 over 2 squared is 7 squared is 49. I factor x plus 7 squared equals 59. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I get x plus 7 equals plus or minus 59. I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. Whoops, I forgot the square root. And we get x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 59. Now at this point, if you wanted to use a calculator for the exact square root, you could. Depending on your teacher, sometimes they let you leave it in this form. If it's a word problem, obviously you would have to calculate. So there is the actual answer. Notice I always include the plus or minus, and here are your estimated answers. Okay, so look at this one. What do you notice about this problem? Okay, you cannot have a can only equal 1 to complete the square. So the first thing that I have to do is divide everything by 3. And these get kind of messy, so you might want to use a different method. So x squared plus 2x, and I'm going to add the 1/3 over here, and I'm going to put plus blank, okay? So I should have moved the 1 over there earlier, but it doesn't matter. So it's negative 1/3, I added it over. This would just be 0. Okay, so now I'm going to go 2 over 2 squared is 1, and I'm going to get my factors. X plus 1 squared equals 4/3. Sometimes it's easier to leave these in a fraction, because when you square things it's just a little bit easier. So now I'm going to take the square root of this, of both sides, and this is where the things we've learned in the last couple units come in handy. So we have x plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 4 over 3. Now, right away we know that we can't have any fractions in our denominator, and this is a perfect square. So we're going to go 2 over square root of 3. I'm going to rationalize the denominator, and I get 2 square root of 3 over 3. So that is x plus 1 equals plus or minus 2 square root of 3 over 3. And now I'm going to subtract my 1 over there, and my final answer is x equals negative 1 plus or minus 2 square root of 3 over 3. Notice that the 1 is not in the denominator. It was not divided by 3. Do not make the mistake of putting it in the numerator. Do not put it in the numerator or the denominator. It is outside, separate. Okay, you can check your answers. Oh, there we go. It's reminding us. And there we go. Okay, and here would be your estimated answers. Okay, just one more time I'm going to show you what you would do in this example. Again, you can divide by 4 right away. So we're going to divide by 4 at the beginning. It doesn't matter because this will just be 0. And we get t squared minus t plus 9 over 4 equals 0. Then we get t squared minus t plus blank equals negative 9 over 4. This is 1, so 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. 1/2 squared is 1/4. And then what we should notice at this point, when we factor, is that we're going to get negative 9 over 4 plus 1/4 is negative 8 over 4, which is negative 2. And right here, a stop sign should go off in your head because you can't have a perfect square equal a negative number, so therefore this has no solution. Okay? If you took the square root, you would get the square root of a negative number. Can't happen. So remember, you want to look for all these little details when you're solving by completing the square. And so now you have an exit ticket, but we're going to do this one a little bit differently. I want you to submit this on the Google Classroom because I want to see all of your steps. So good luck with that. Copy them down and do the problems on the Google Classroom and submit them under exit ticket 4.4.